Now we're recording. And
disregard the homeowner.
right, it's preparing live stream. Should be about another 30 seconds.
10493, did you copy?
Come on.
Don't fail us now, internet.
And we are, come on, computer.
On mine, it says we are now streaming live on
We are
Facebook.
live.
We are live. Here we are. Thank you so much. All right. We are so excited that technology is on our side tonight, but more excited for all of our audience tonight who is joining us live on our Facebook page. Obviously, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us for our Human Trafficking in the Pandemic virtual community conversation event. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cara Mackler, and I am the manager of Campus Education, Training and Outreach, Human Trafficking Specialist, and Legislative Liaison at the Women's Center of Greater Danbury. So January is Human Trafficking Awareness and Prevention Month. And so I've invited our panel of experts here to help us discuss how the pandemic has impacted human trafficking victims and what our community can do to combat this issue. So I am so thrilled to introduce our incredible panel tonight. So I'm going to introduce them now, and then we will go ahead and get started with our questions. For our audience, if you have any questions for our panelists throughout our conversation tonight, please feel free to leave them in the comments, and we will address them at the end of the event. So first we have with us tonight is Brooke Morris, pronouns she, her, hers. So Brooke Morris, LCSW, is a program supervisor with the Department of Children and Families. Ms. Morris has been with the department for over 14 years and has worked in various roles within the department, including as a frontline social worker in several offices, intimate partner violence consultant, and regional office program supervisor prior to joining the department's care line. While in these roles, Ms. Morris was also a human anti-trafficking response team liaison and lead trainer in the subject area of child trafficking for law enforcement, as well as the community awareness curriculum. Prior to joining the Department of Children and Families, Ms. Morris worked in the Greater Danbury community as a social worker. Additionally, Ms. Morris is a subject matter expert in the field of forensic psychology and adjunct professor at Post University. Next, we have Officer William Chapman, pronouns he, him, his. Officer William Chapman has been an officer in the Newtown, Connecticut Police Department since 2008. He has served on the Honor Guard, SWAT team, Bicycle Patrol, Marine Patrol, and Peer Support Team. He has been a school resource officer and youth officer since 2015, and he also offers consulting services to school districts and law enforcement agencies with the mission of fostering positive community relationships and taking a team approach to building physically, socially, and emotionally safer schools. And next we have Leah Juliet, pronouns they, them, theirs. Leah Juliet is an award-winning writer, speaker, organizer, and activist from Connecticut. Leah is the founder and executive director of March Against Revenge Porn, an international 501c3 advocacy nonprofit and political action campaign combating image abuse and sexual cyber harassment, known commonly as revenge porn. Through global organizing, media advocacy, victim support services, legislative action, national protest marches, research and curriculum, and a legal defense fund. In 2018, Leah's testimony was utilized by the Connecticut General Assembly to help amend Connecticut's unlawful dissemination of an intimate image statute to increase penalties for perpetrators of sexual cyber harassment. Leah graduated from Western Connecticut State University in 2018 with an honors degree in political science with focuses on justice and law administration, gender studies, and conflict resolution, and is currently pursuing an MA in social justice and community organizing from Prescott College. So obviously we have an incredible panel of experts with us tonight, and I want to thank you all so much for being here with us to have this important conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our questions here. So to start us off, we have our first question is really kind of getting into the crux of why we're here tonight. How has the pandemic created new vulnerabilities for victims of trafficking? And within that, focusing on both sex and labor trafficking, how has maybe the increase of online use created more or less opportunity for traffickers to exploit individuals virtually? And maybe how has the job insecurity due to the pandemic impacted individuals for experiencing labor trafficking? So however kind of angle you would like to take that, and if anyone wants to start us off.
So I'll begin, and just in general talking about sex trafficking. And when we think about that and, you know, the overall online use when it comes to child sex trafficking and how frequently traffickers do meet their victims online. And once the pandemic hit, it really became social isolation for so many people. And so we look to all the different online platforms to connect with people we know, to connect with people that we don't know. We did a lot of those, you know, games and things where you would post like different things about yourselves, and you were giving the world all of these intimate details about yourself, your middle name, where you live, where you grew up, your street, all those different kinds of things. And really what that is that those are just all things that traffickers can use the moment that you show that there's some vulnerability. And so if you have any kind of a vulnerability where you're feeling lonely, where you may want, you know, someone to talk to, or anything that's going on, and you post that, traffickers will see, especially if your page is public, and they may reach out and just start that conversation and say, hi, how are you? And all that you want to do is connect with someone because you've lost all different kinds of connections. And so the online platform has really, really escalated the traffickers' ability to meet new people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Oh, I think we lost.
We lost Leah.
Yeah. Oh no. Well, we were just talking about how challenging technology can be, but.
So I guess I'll answer then. Good. So what I would say is that I think you definitely, technology is the very easy answer, that kids are so much more accessible than they would have been even a year or two ago. And what I'm seeing at the middle school level is, you know, not to any fault of the schools, it's so normalized now. We sort of did a really good job of villainizing the online chat room, right? Mm-hmm. You know, for you know, folks maybe my age or a generation or so younger, we've sort of undone that. And again, it's not to the fault of the schools. It's, you know, the only way that we can make really learning happen is we've now renormalized the, hey, jump into this chat room with a bunch of people and share and talk openly. You know, and that's really what we've tried to model in order for their education to happen. And so I think an unfortunate byproduct of that is kids, certainly in my experience, are definitely not as leery as they were, again, even a year or two ago, about jumping into a chat room where you might not know everybody and just sharing a little bit more openly. And I think if you combine that with, you know, something you've, Cara, seen me talk to my middle schoolers about before, you know, I talk a lot about when we're at our most vulnerable. I use the acronym BLAST, right? It comes from, it's borrowed from the, addiction community: bored, lonely, angry, stressed, tired. Right now, we've put young people into all 5 of those emotional places just by the circumstances that the world is in. And when you're in one or more of those places, you're predisposed to make a bad choice, maybe an unhealthy or unsafe choice that satisfies one of those needs really quickly. And so again, we have kids that are plugged in, that know how to use these devices, that are always on the forefront of what new apps are coming out to chat and connect and interact. We have those kids in all of those emotional places, and we've sort of stripped away some of that leeriness, some of that hesitation for them to just jump right in with strangers. So I think it's a really, just from a technology standpoint, it's a really dangerous time for them, but also from a developmental standpoint, from a social emotional standpoint, I think we have some real work to do, as far as normalizing what healthy relationships and healthy interactions look like at the elementary level, so that when these kids are in high school and middle school, they know an unhealthy relationship when they see it, and they're less attracted to these folks who want to pull them in and bait them online.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I know we lost you there for a second, but I'm glad you're able to come back in.
Listen, it sounds like there's a windstorm outside my window. So if I lose Wi-Fi connection momentarily, I'm truly sorry. But I will say the climate of, I can talk to the climate of tech-based sexual abuse, because that's the space that I work in, specifically image abuse and revenge porn. And right now, Americans and folks all around the world really are isolated with their devices. Nothing is consistent and nothing is certain day to day, except I will have my phone, I will have my laptop. And relying on that internet as a source of security and community can be wonderful, but it can also be detrimental. Especially now with the environment of unemployment, there's high stress. People are trying to alleviate that stress by turning to relationships and starting new relationships. And they're potentially getting involved with folks who don't have their best interest in mind. I know in particular in the United States, 4 out of 5 adults report sending intimate images or videos or sexually graphic text messages. So this isn't an issue that lives in the confines of the internet. This is an issue that affects everyone. And what I spoke to Cara about the other day in a panel, in a conversation that we had, was that with revenge porn, you're not sure if it's a chicken or the egg type of scenario. Traffickers can find their victims through photos online on websites like 4chan and 8chan and places like that. They can find their victims based on hometown, based on name, based on picture. Or traffickers who have a victim of sex trafficking can take pictures of them to keep them in their possession by saying, I will show these pictures to your parents if you don't stay with me, or just posting to show off what they think to be in their possession anyway. So it's a really horrible situation right now, and we know that young people are becoming even more active on the internet. In the last 10 years, social media has really just gone rampant. I got a cell phone when I was in 6th grade, and I'm going to be 24 years old, and so I know that people are getting cell phones in elementary school now, which means even with parental guidelines and protections, we can't always control who our young children are talking to, and so we need to do that. And I think that's part of the conversation we're going to be having tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I think that helps. Obviously, all of those perspectives and observations help to really set the tone for why we're having this conversation, right? This is something that has always existed, right? Trafficking is something that happens in the shadows. It's been happening forever. But particularly now, we're seeing how the pandemic has really impacted individuals and families, and just made them extra vulnerable to these situations that traffickers, unfortunately, are preying on. They're taking advantage of those vulnerabilities. So I know a lot of you mentioned, obviously we're talking about the digital kind of aspect of all of this, but what are some of the trends that you might be seeing online, specifically maybe what sites are traffickers using or buyers using? I know, Leah, you just mentioned a couple, maybe hearing a little bit more information about what those are and how they're used, maybe what apps or what games are traffickers using to communicate with youth. I know, a bunch of you mentioned that kind of vaguely before, so can we dive into that a little bit more?
Sure. One of the ones that we're seeing in Connecticut right now is Omegle, which is one of the apps that you are able to share and chat anonymously, and it connects you with random strangers. And you can connect by audio, you can connect by video. And so a lot of youth and traffickers are both using that as a means to connect and traffic. So that's a big one most recently. But I also know some of the staples that many people use, like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. Those are all places, TikTok, that traffickers will use or youth will use in order to reach out to individuals and become a victim. So we've seen a lot of those recently. Even some of the platforms that are shared within their school systems, they're able to connect with people in different ages that they may not have necessarily been able to connect to. So that's also a risk for a lot of our youth.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Omegle is very frustrating, I know, from a law enforcement standpoint, because like many other similar apps that have come out, it's hosted outside of the United States. And the traffickers are well aware of this. And so I've read, in the course of an investigation, I've read chats between a predator and a victim. And, it gets to that point where things start to get a little, little heavy, a little spicy in the chat that they're having. And then there's always that line where the predator says, hey, do you have Omegle? Let's go to Omegle. It could almost be if they, advertise to villains, it could almost be a commercial for the app itself that, hey, let's jump on Omegle. That could be their tagline, because in almost all of the online sort of more traditional predator from far off place victim, here in town, that's what we're seeing a lot of. Another one that you mentioned, Brooke, is TikTok. I am daily just surprised that we don't have more traffickers utilizing this app. And I don't say that as a challenge to them. I say that as a warning to folks who are using it, because just a few of the trending, vines that you'll see on TikTok are, hey, Fairfield County, Connecticut, check, and then a list of places that you go and things that you do. And this is on a public post where the goal is to get as many likes and shares and views as possible. So very easy for somebody who maybe already is desiring attention from others to start getting messages like, oh my gosh, I'm from this town, just by looking at the places that this person visits. I'm seeing a lot of that on TikTok. I'm seeing a lot of children posting TikToks in their bedrooms. And I've actually done this with, some of my students before. I've told them, like, hey, based on a TikTok that you posted, I know where you go to school, what sports you play. Very easy for me to go on the website and find a schedule of your games. Very easy for me to send you a message or a comment in TikTok and say, oh my gosh, I was at your field hockey game. You did such a great job. And, again, it's right now, especially, but just in general, that personal connection, that other person that's showing a genuine interest in us, when generally online we're consumers of each other. That's really, really attractive to an impulsive young person.
And I would also say any dating website or app, Tinder, Grindr, all of them. But even meetme.com is a big one. So even ones that you are advertised on, television to meet individuals, traffickers are using that. Children are logging on and creating accounts with that as well.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues, but I would also like to add that there is a huge website that I won't mention the name of because I don't want to facilitate traffic to that website. But if you're in law enforcement or at DCF, contact me and I will tell you what website it is so you can look. It is a website that my intimate images were posted on when I was a teenager, and it was raided by Dutch police in 2018, and it got taken down for several years, but it is back up and running, and it has photos of millions of underage non-consenting victims and also adult non-consenting victims, and the photos are organized by town, by state, by high school, by college, by country. You could look someone up based on their name, and it has thousands in the state of Connecticut. So it is an awful, awful website. And once you dig deeper into that website, you'll find that folks are commenting on the photos saying, I have more, send me a Kik. Kik is a messaging app in which people can create a username and privately message an individual from anywhere in the world. And Kik is where a lot of this image trading is happening, I believe, because history gets deleted on Kik. But that's where a lot of trading is happening. Also, of course, like my colleagues mentioned, Instagram and Twitter are rampant. I have worked with victims who met individuals on Instagram who then initiated them to have video calls in which, they took off their clothing and then they were recorded without their knowledge. And once they were recorded, they were sextorted. People have, the perpetrator said, I will share this video with your friends, with your family. I've followed everyone in your contact list. I will share this if you do not send me X amount of money. And that happens right on Instagram. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I left out Twitter, where we just saw this week, former counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, posting a nude photo of her 16-year-old daughter on her Twitter fleets. So this is happening everywhere. It's happening in the confines of the dark web on these websites that I will not mention their names. And it is happening in public on social media that we use every day. And we have to be aware of it because it is affecting everyone in our communities, and it's not going to stop anytime soon unless we pass legislation to criminalize it.
Absolutely. I'm horrified that that website is back up and running, and to hear that. But yeah, I obviously, this is something that happens so easily on the internet. We talk about it all the time of just how unfortunately easy it is to obtain these images and spread them around. And once they're out there, it's so impossible to get them back. And I remember conversations with the Officer Chapman about just like the amount of, knowledge that these perpetrators are getting from these kids that they have no idea, just in the short videos, or even just the trends of sharing very personal information in videos and sharing, things about their life and opening up to really anyone in the world who can listen. So it definitely creates.
I talk when I talk to them about online responsibility. There's another website that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's I call it to them the General Online Officer's Guide for Law Enforcement. And I freak them out when I say that I don't need a warrant to use it, that anybody can go on there. And it's a silly acronym I came up with for Google. But I think that what they don't realize is how truly easy it is to, I can Google right now, name a town. I can look up what students are on their honor roll and then start from there. And then, again, very easy to just, if I just want to fish for names and generate a list of kids that I know are high school or middle school students in any town in the country, that's a very easy thing to do. It's all in the local newspapers, the community Facebook pages, and it's all just open public information. Like I said, I think kids need to kind of build back up that leeriness of somebody they don't know saying, oh, I saw you at your hockey game. I saw you at your, oh, I noticed you got, honor roll, things like that. That should raise major red flags for kids. And right now it's just not. It's they're very open to flattery from anyone and everyone.
Yeah. And I think that's a perfect. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Brooke. Yeah.
I was going to say, to piggyback off of that, I think the biggest concern is that when all of those start to happen and those red flags start, because of the pandemic, there's that lack of safe space, whether it's at a school, whether it's connecting with a community provider or, a counselor or therapist that you've worked with, or even, a mentor or a friend. You don't have that ability to have that face-to-face conversation with them. Or if you do, it's very limited. You have masks on, you're separated. And so the ability to kind of intercede into some of those that, if someone were to go to Officer Chapman in school and say, hey, this person said something weird, I don't know if I really like it. They may not have that face-to-face right now about what's going on. And traffickers also have the ability to kind of curb when their victims are going for services, because you can do telehealth from anywhere. So whether you're at the trafficker's house or you're, wherever you are, it really just that impacts. So it does give people the freedom to be able to engage in services, while they're at home, but it also gives the trafficker the freedom to have their victim in a different location and still engage in the services. And so just to think even broader about, once all those red flags start, how we really can't address them right now.
Right. Yeah, and even considering that traffickers can sometimes be family members. So if children are living at home with their parents or caregivers who are supposed to take care of them, but are actually exploiting them or trafficking them, that just adds the additional barriers to that, opportunity to reach out to a safe adult or safe resource. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a perfect segue to our next question, which is obviously for any parents who may be listening right now, they might be like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. What can we do? So what would be kind of your tips or advice for parents, either on how to spot signs, maybe in their children, things to kind of look out for, or just how to talk to their kids about these issues to kind of encourage the online safety and know what apps they're using and things like that?
My first piece of advice, as hard as it is, don't panic. For every parent, don't panic. Because they're really hard conversations, and the biggest fear from a youth is the reaction of their parent and how they're going to react the first time that they say, I shared an image that I shouldn't have shared, and now it's on a website. Or, someone is threatening me, or, this person's talking to me and I don't know how they know this information about me. And if as a parent, you react negatively, it's going to impact your child disclosing more information or disclosing the next time that the conversation gets even more uncomfortable for them. So that would be my biggest first piece of advice, and probably the hardest to ever do as a parent.
Yeah.
But I would definitely say, have regular conversations with your kids about who they're talking to, what's going on online, what kind of apps and social media that they have, who their friends are. Be friends with them on social media. I can't tell you how many parents are not friends with their kids on social media, so they have no idea what's being posted. Educate yourselves and your kids. Make sure they don't have 2 accounts. It is very frequent that kids have multiple accounts. They'll have the account that they have with all their friends and their aunts and their uncles, and then they have a separate account with their friends. So make sure, know if they have multiple email addresses, and make it a regular, normal conversation. Like, how's your day? What'd you see online? Who did you talk to? And don't make it seem like it's something that's a punishment, because there are really good things about online. Obviously, we're on Facebook now, so there are great things about it. And so to really kind of normalize that conversation, I think with your children is really helpful.
Thank you.
So on the, same topic of open and honest conversation at home, which is really, I can only echo everything Brooke said. She said it perfectly. I would add as a parent, if you have a child that's on a social media app, you need to be on that app and just as literate in that app as your student is. So, if your kid is on TikTok, you need to be on TikTok. You don't necessarily need to be posting TikToks, but you need to, at the very least, understand how the app functions. You need to be watching what's trending and things like that. And that's going to allow you to have conversations. One of the, I talk a lot about normalizing healthy relationships, and that's not just peer-to-peer, but as far as adult to kid. If I'm the most consistent 37-year-old, person in a child's life, I need to show them how that's supposed to look. And so, as parents, many parents in the community aren't just parents. They're coaches, they're teachers. They see their kids' friends at the grocery store and at the deli, and we're communities. And so something I've found pretty effective with my students in the, at the middle school and the high school is they'll be making a TikTok and they'll say, oh, will you be in a TikTok with us? And I'll stop them. I'll say, well, what are we going to do? Let's plan it out. Let's storyboard this a little bit and see, and they'll explain it to me. And I'll say, I can't be in that TikTok with you. And they'll say, well, why? I'll say, well, have you listened to the words of the song that you're asking me, a grown man, to dance with children to? Like, that's highly inappropriate. I can't do that. And just that, it seems very basic and simple, but for a lot of them, that's the first time that, that a grown man has said, hey, a grown man should not and will not be dancing and singing those words with you. That's not okay. So we have to start normalizing what's okay and not okay online. And as parents, the only way to do that, like I said, is to be just as literate in these apps as our kids are. We have to understand how they work. We have to understand the language of them, the structure of them, what you're capable of within the app, if it can privately chat, if you can take and send and receive videos and text messages. We have to understand exactly what these apps can do before we allow children to be on them unsupervised.
Yeah, I would definitely echo those sentiments, but also add that the moment your child has a piece of technology, whether you give them an iPod Touch that only accesses the internet, they can't text, whether you give them an iPad, a laptop, or a cell phone, that should start the conversation around safety, around consent, around the age of consent, and around safe texting and safe relationships. But don't make it an unapproachable topic. I mean, I, went through this as a victim, and I love my parents. They're phenomenal parents, but we never had those conversations. And because of that, I didn't see the warning signs when I was being victimized. And I felt like I couldn't come to them because we had never talked about this. So I thought it was taboo and I thought I would get in trouble. So conversations around what is safe, what is okay, what is consent, what is a crime, what to do if you are victimized is imperative. And to say, sending pictures when you are under the age of 18 is not okay. It is against the law. If this happens, you can still come to me. We will report this together. I won't judge you. Is so important because judgment is the biggest fear to so many kids. I would also say to be aware of apps on your children's phones that hide photos. There used to be apps. Now there's literal technology built into the camera roll where you can hide photos from the camera roll. So even if you're going through your kid's camera roll every day, check for the hidden photos that aren't in the camera roll. Chances are that will be where the intimate images are that your child might be sending. And I would also say when you talk to your children about things like Snapchat and they say, don't worry, mom and dad, Snapchat goes away in 3 seconds. The pictures go away. They don't go away. There's technology that saves those images. So even if you send a nude photo via Snapchat and think it will disappear in 3 seconds, someone is likely saving or screenshotting that image. So make sure, like the officer said, that you are as literate in social media and in these other aspects of media as your child is, because unfortunately right now what we're seeing is law enforcement often and parents and legislators that can't keep up with the fast pace at which technology is progressing, which leads to danger for our children.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I think it's so interesting because it feels maybe daunting for some parents as it's such complicated apps and so many different apps that there are and so many nuances to each one. But I love what you all were saying about just making it approachable, making it a part of your daily conversations, modeling, healthy behaviors. It all ties in together. And we actually did a training recently, also through Facebook Live, about a month ago, maybe, that was on kind of tips for parents and how to have these conversations, because it's not easy, but it definitely is so important. So my next question then would be to our general public and kind of the community, whether parents or otherwise, what information would you like the public or community to know about human trafficking? And then kind of the second part of that question would be, what can the community do to combat this issue?
Well, I think as with most aspects of law enforcement in general, I want the community and the public to understand the reality and that it's much different from what they've been shown on TV and in the movies. And we are, I think we're a society that finds human trafficking very entertaining when we see it in Hollywood, because usually it's this gang from somewhere in a far off country, and they snatch somebody up who's on vacation, and then the hero goes and saves them and saves everybody, and they all come home and live happily ever after. And unfortunately, the issue is a lot more nuanced and complicated, and usually it starts in the home, among people in the home, rather than some far off person snatching somebody's up when they're away and vulnerable. And I think people really need to understand that. I think we need to confront some of the, just like, so many of the other issues we've attacked in the last couple of years, we need to confront the ugliness of it. And a big part of that is admitting some of the ways that we've kind of been blind to it, and that it is happening right under our noses, right in our backyards. And it doesn't always look like somebody being physically snatched away by kidnappers. Usually it looks like somebody very willingly getting in an Uber and traveling to a far off place because somebody has shown them a life that seems on its face more attractive than the life they're living. So the community needs to understand that, and the community needs to understand that when they see a 12 or 13-year-old kid getting into a cab outside of a grocery store across the street from the middle school, they need to understand that that's odd, and they're not wasting anybody's time or bothering anybody by contacting the authorities or stopping the child for a second, safely and appropriately, obviously, and saying, hey, we don't usually see somebody getting into a cab here. Is everything okay? Do you need some help? Do you need, as communities, we really need to be a little bit more aware of what's going on with our kids.
Sorry, I'll go. Sorry, Brooke. Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I'll talk to the image abuse side of this situation. I would first like to dispel some myths that the general public should know. And the first myth is that this doesn't happen very often. 10 million internet users in the United States have been threatened or victimized by revenge porn. 10 million. If 10 million folks in the United States were sick with something like COVID, we would call it a pandemic, but we're not, because it's so stigmatized. That's about 1 in 25 Americans. So imagine how many folks in your school, in your community, are going through this. And that says to me two things. The first is that this is happening so often, and yet there's such subpar and limited legislation. So that needs to change. And the second is for victims who think that they're alone and that nobody's ever gone through this. There is a whole community of victims and allies and survivors who've gone through this, who survived, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And the answer to this is not suicide. It is surviving and telling your story. I will also say that this is not about the commonalities here between trafficking and revenge porn, besides the obvious that we've already spoken about, is that it's about power. It's about power over the marginalized. And that's why 90% of that 10 million victims in the United States are women. That's why 17% of lesbian, gay, and bisexual people are victimized in comparison to only 2% of heterosexual people. That's why Black and Brown and Latinx and Indigenous people are disproportionately victimized, because when a perpetrator sees someone as vulnerable, sees someone as having multiple layers of oppression to their identity, they're going to target them. They're going to make them feel safe and loved and desired, like I felt, and in a community that often doesn't make them feel that way. And then when they feel pressured to send these photos, they will say, I have no choice, because otherwise I'll lose that intimacy, which is such a valuable currency in my environment where I don't have that. So as far as what society should know, is that this is happening everywhere. This is happening to so many people. You probably know many people who've gone through this, even though they don't talk about it. And more people should talk about it, especially people who haven't been victimized, because when you've not been victimized, you have the privilege to be able to talk about it without trauma. So talk about it and normalize these conversations.
I agree. And I think part of the normalizing the conversations and what everyone has been talking about is to understand that it is so much a part of our culture now. If you think about some of the music that's out there, if you think about the videos, not just what you see on TikTok, but it's almost in a way promoting engaging in some kind of a sex act for something of value and something of value to a child. And that's what this is. When you're talking about child sex trafficking. And so, when we think about, even just, I listen to the radio all day long in my office and, just going through and you actually start to really listen to what's on Soul Cycle radio and the words that people are saying. And so you realize that kids are listening to this, and to them, you're also combating not just being a parent to them and trying to educate them, but also what society is saying is normal. And then it's normal to do these things. It's normal to want to share pictures. It's normal to want to reach out to people online. Like, this is a normal behavior. And so I think as a community to really start to shape how we frame what all of our kids are seeing in the schools, and, having those conversations about what's real versus what's just being put out there in, music or online, or who's an influencer on Instagram, or, any of those kind of things.
And that reminded me of something. And I just talked about the need to normalize these discussions, but also we have normalized talking about sending nude pictures a lot in the media as of recently. For instance, last night I was just watching an episode of the show Mr. Mayor, which is a brand new show on, I believe, Peacock TV, and one of the characters asked a young high school girl who seemed upset, "What's the matter? Nudes get leaked?" So casually. And I was like, that's not nudes get leaked. That is child pornography. That is a crime. And the way we just let it slip off our tongue, like, oh, nudes get leaked, like it happens every day. It's not okay. And it lets people think, well, if this happened, if this is so casual, like I shouldn't take this seriously, when it's a very, very serious issue.
Yeah, absolutely. It dehumanizes, right? And it makes the issue seem like it's something that I remember even going into schools, like the middle schools that we would teach in at the Women's Center, and hearing students talk about just sexual harassment in general, like other types of behaviors, and just, oh, well, that's just the way it is. That's just what people do. That attitude of like, we see it all the time. We see it every day. What are we going to do to change that? But especially as what you were saying, Leah, of the people who haven't experienced this, and adults, safe adults, right, that can model those things. It's so important for us to have these conversations like we're having tonight, and encourage other parents and any adult, any person in the community to have these conversations and not shy away from the topic, but also to educate themselves on it. So my last question for you all is, obviously we've given some tools and tips and advice, but what are the resources that are available to victims of trafficking in Connecticut? And that can be for both children and adults.
So one of the biggest resources is Love 146 that folks can reach out to online, and they can gather a lot of information on there. They also have services for youth. The Women's Center is a great place, to provide support. The DCF Heart website has a lot of information with different links. And in those links, there's also internet safety, how to talk to your kids about that. There actually is a pamphlet that has all the different apps on it, the most popular apps. It has what they are and the pictures of what the actual app is, and the descriptions. So that's very helpful for parents. To know a little bit more about what's going on. There's online safety contracts that you can have with your kids. And that kind of helps open the conversation about, hey, did you know about this? Did you know about that? In the communities, I think law enforcement are huge partners when it comes to having those, tough conversations with kids and getting them to see the reality of what can potentially happen, or having, as Officer Chapman has had those conversations where he's being asked to, participate in something that really a parent or an adult shouldn't be participating in, and what that really means.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little self-serving to tell people to use me. I can be a resource, but certainly ask. So I'm in a very unique position in the Newtown Police, where I'm fully integrated into the schools, and so Sadly, I know that means for some teens in our community, I'm having more consistent, deep, and real conversations with them than their parents are. All that's to say, I do have if you're a parent and you're not sure how to have these conversations, I've triumphed in these conversations and I have failed miserably in these conversations. And I'm sure I can offer some help in how to navigate those waters. And I think the internet is even though it's kind of the main source of some of these problems, it's also the most incredible resource out there. If you're a parent and you want to know, what puts a kid at risk of human trafficking, you can literally type that very question and read and, vet your sources but read articles about how these things happen and just kind of get in touch with the reality of what it is. You can ask your local, judicial district and again, some of this takes a little bit of legwork and we don't really like to do a lot of legwork these days, but you can find out how many sexual assault cases and child pornography cases and things like that our courts are prosecuting. The state judicial website is great. If there's an adult in your kid's life and something about them isn't quite right, you can look them up and you can see if they've been arrested before for endangering a child and things like that. These are all tools that are very readily at our disposal. But the greatest and most undervalued resource, I think, is our kids. And it all comes back to just we're not having the conversations to really understand the reality of what's bothering them. And there's because then we would be hearing things and we could respond. When I hear a student tell me that it's sort of a thing that, if you get asked by a stranger for pictures or something online, that's sort of that gives you a little bit of clout, oh, I was worth, asking. What they need to understand is that that's not, hey, I love you and you are wonderful and beautiful and special. And there is so much potential in you and there's so many great things about you. But that person is literally asking everyone for the same thing that they asked you for. And, they need to understand that. They need to understand that it's not, it doesn't make them any better or worse than other kids if they're getting asked or not asked for these things. It's like the folks at the mall kiosk that walk up to everybody that passes by and makes eye contact and says, hey, you look like you could be an actor, and, for $50, we'll sign you up. It doesn't make them special to sort of have this list of people who have asked to them for these things. And again, we sort of need to put back up those barriers of, being pursued by strangers on the internet used to be really scary and bad. And we've sort of, normalized it a little bit, and we kind of need to build that back up again.
And to piggyback off that, and having those conversations, is that if you're noticing that your child's behaviors are changing, things are getting a little bit more secretive, or a lot more secretive, or they're more apt to, maybe not, their behaviors are changing. They're not going to bed at the same time. They're not eating the same way. Their clothes are changing. They're, all those different kinds of things where, they just look stressed. Don't be afraid to reach out to any, local provider that can help have that conversation with you, whether it be, starting with some family therapy, or any local provider can help support you in having those tough conversations and be almost a mediator and coach you both through it to help open up the door to have that conversation. Because we all know when our kids, something's just off and we just don't know what it is, and we don't always know what to do. And so, reach out to any local provider that you have that can help that conversation as well, if you're not comfortable, starting that with your kids.
And I know it doesn't necessarily address the question, but you just made me think of something that I cannot, parents, if you're with us and you're watching, I can't stress enough, do not allow a child to have a device in their bedroom overnight. cell phone, laptop, tablet, they cannot be in the bedroom overnight. And the biggest, well, they use it as an alarm clock. Guess what? Even in 2021, they still make and sell alarm clocks. You can get one cheap on Amazon. So get them an alarm clock. Do not allow them to have that device in the bedroom overnight. Set a time in your family where it gets gathered and taken and put somewhere safe. I don't know what the numbers are. I don't have the statistics, but I can promise you, you are adding, similar to, locking your car doors, you're adding a layer of safety and taking away a vulnerability, just simply by doing that. So I got fired up when I remembered, because I didn't want to forget to say that tonight.
No, that was great. Thank you.
I have a lot of resources, so hear me out for a moment.
Go for it. Let's go.
The first would be Connecticut's legislation is called unlawful dissemination of an intimate image. It makes revenge porn, image abuse a crime here in the state of Connecticut. However, it's not a crime federally yet. 46 states and the District of Columbia have laws criminalizing this, but every state is different. Disproportionately, based on borders, people can seek different justice. So what we're doing at March Against Revenge Porn is talking to legislators federally to try to get them to put revenge porn legislation on the legislative agenda for this session of Congress. So if you are in a different state, or if you are in Connecticut, you could go to our website, use our script, call your legislator, the exact script, just fill in your own words and tell them you want them to take up revenge porn legislation in the United States Senate or in the United States Congress. The legislation was originally written by Kamala Harris, who's now our vice president. So I'm hoping that we can have revenge porn legislation federally in the next 4 years under the Biden administration. Unfortunately, in Connecticut, there is a statute of limitations for these things. As far as I know, most statute of limitations are generally 5 years. In Connecticut, there are certain laws and certain crimes which there is no statute of limitations. Human trafficking is one of them. Sexual abuse of a minor is another. Revenge porn is not one of them. I personally am taking up the cause to make revenge porn one of them, because it is a form of sexual violence and it leads to trafficking. So why is there a statute of limitations? I don't know. We're gonna find out. Next, you can follow March Against Revenge Porn. Obviously, it's my organization, marchagainstrevengeporn.org. You could also follow the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative, CCRI, which has a lot of wonderful resources. If you are a victim and you're trying to bring your case to trial, you can get a lawyer pro bono or low bono at consentlawyers.com or the Cyber Civil Rights Legal Project. They have lawyers in almost every state that do pro bono or low bono legal work for victims. The March Against Revenge Porn has a brand new legal defense fund where we're giving $500 mini grants to victims who are trying to seek legal justice, because oftentimes an initial consultation fee with a lawyer can be anywhere from like $300 to $1,000, which is crazy. So apply at our website, marchagainstrevengeporn.org/legal defense fund, and we will review your application and perhaps give you a grant. And then finally, of course, the police. This is a crime. Bring the crime to the police. They may not fully understand right away, because of course many law enforcement officers are unlike Officer Chapman and are trying to keep up with our technology, but keep at it. And then of course there's the Women's Center, which is a phenomenal resource as well here in Greater Danbury. So if you need those resources, my direct messages are always open. So if you didn't write them down, message me at Leah Juliet at March Against Revenge Porn, and I will be happy to connect you with the resources that I know.
Awesome, wonderful, that is fantastic. I also want to add to the list of resources the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So you can report tips and share any kind of information you may have. So that number is 1-888-373-7888. And you can find also a lot of information on their website. So if you're interested in learning more about the issues and a lot of things that we've talked about tonight, that would be an additional resource. So that was the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So I wanted to open the floor to our panelists to just share any last kind of final comments that you might have. I know we kind of added a lot to our conversation already, but obviously this is a huge topic. So if there's anything else kind of that you'd like to share, you may do so now.
I did, as we were talking, I realized that we never answered your labor trafficking question.
Oh, sure.
And so I just wanted to point out that in regards to labor trafficking, obviously the pandemic and what has happened with so many individuals being unemployed, that the risk for being trafficked for labor purposes is incredibly high at this point. And people are desperate for many reasons. Financial stress is one of the most difficult stressors that you could ever have. And that if you are either being trafficked in regards to labor, or if there is a concern that you know someone that there may be trafficked in labor ways, that they should reach out to law enforcement and report their concerns, because it can be very scary right now. Well, we don't know what's going to happen, with the future for so many different people who rely on income. Or all of us do, but who don't have any income coming in right now, or don't have income to meet the needs of their family. And so to just be mindful and aware as folks are, saying, oh, I'm going to go work here for $100, and something just doesn't sit right, to have that conversation and just make sure that, they're okay and that they're safe, and that they aren't going to be taken advantage of and working for very little. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for adding that. I'm glad.
You're
And
welcome.
it's interesting because I also speak through many times the lens of sex trafficking. And that's a gap in my knowledge that I want to learn more about the labor trafficking side, because as we were saying from the very beginning, this is a very invisible crime. So we need to talk about it more. We need to learn about it more. So thank you so much for adding that. Anyone else have any final thoughts?
I'll give some final thoughts. Listen, first of all, I recognize that everything that I say sounds very soapboxy, but I'd like to get on my soapbox once more, if you will let me.
This is the platform for it. Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah. So listen, I sound like I'm running for president every time I open my mouth. It's a problem. Anyway, to folks who are going through this, specifically young children who are living through this right now, you are in no ways alone. 10 million internet users are victimized by this. I am one of them. I am 24 years old. I'm a very accessible person. I have lots of social media. You can talk to me and I can help you. March Against Revenge Porn does takedown services in some instances where we can send DMCA requests to the website to take the photos down. We also obviously will report these cases. We will get you legal advice, non-legal advice. We are here for you, and you are not alone. When I was 14 years old, was going through this, and I thought that my world was over. I thought there was nothing beyond my future, beyond suicide. I never thought I would live to see 24, and in 2 days, I will be 24. So what I mean by that is life is so precious and it changes, and you're not always going to be in that dark place that you are in now. If you feel like the only person who hears you and understands you is the person who is trafficking you or the person who is abusing you, then you have a wild, beautiful, full life full of wonderful, loving people that you have yet to meet. And I promise you that you will meet them. And I will be one of those people for you. The Women's Center will be a resource for you. DCF will be a resource for you. The police will be a resource for you. We are all here for you, and we all see you. This is an invisible crime, but you are not invisible. So please, please, please remember that.
Beautifully said.
Soapbox over.
No, it's so great. Thank you.
And I won't say any better than that, so I won't try. It's just it's so important. I can't stress enough how important it is that kids know that they're seen and that they have real value and that they matter and that they're loved. And so I tell my students as often as I can how dearly I love them, to the point that they roll their eyes and it's they're sick of hearing it, but I won't stop because it's true. So that's just the most important thing, is kids that know they have value and that they matter and that they're loved and that we see them and we're here for them.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all so incredibly much for taking the time to speak with us tonight, to speak to our audience tonight. I want to check in with Matt to see if we have any questions coming in from the community via Facebook.
We do not. We do not.
Was anybody
We've had
there?
a lot of people watching, so that's
okay.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you. So I guess that means that we can wrap it up. So I just want to, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this topic. It is something that is so important and is happening in absolutely every single community. So for those watching, as a reminder, obviously, DCF, Newtown Police, and obviously all law enforcement, any community that you may be in, and March Against Revenge Porn are all resources available to you in addition to us at the Women's Center. We serve people of all gender identities, any background, any experience that they're coming in with. So know that we are still here for you, even remotely, even virtually. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our panelists for any support or resources. And thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
All right, we are no longer live. And